lost. And sometimes he was a good winner, but sometimes a sore loser.
James Burton was never just another guitarist. He was the musician Elvis Presley trusted most, the one he turned to night after night with a simple command that became legendary. Now, at 85 years old, James has finally opened up about the memories he carried quietly for decades, sharing what Elvis was really like away from the spotlight. These aren't stories about fame or flash. They're stories about loyalty, kindness, pressure, and the deep bond between two artists who changed music forever. James Burton's connection to music began almost as soon as he could hold a guitar. Growing up in rural Louisiana, he didn't have formal lessons or expensive equipment. What he had was instinct. He learned by listening, by feeling the strings beneath his fingers, and by trusting his ear. Music became his escape, his joy, and his identity. Born in 1939 to hard-working parents, James grew up in a modest home where life wasn't always easy, but the guitar gave him purpose. By his teenage years, people could already tell there was something special about him. His playing turned heads locally and then far beyond. That early promise led him to the Louisiana Hayride radio show, a launchpad for future stars and a place where his path quietly crossed with Elvis Presley's long before they would truly work together. While most teenagers only dreamed of bigger stages, James made it real. Before turning 18, he packed up and moved to Los Angeles, where he joined rising star Ricky Nelson. What started as rhythm guitar quickly became lead, and James helped shape the sound behind some of the most recognizable hits of the era. His guitar wasn't flashy, but it spoke clearly, emotionally, and with precision. Even before that, James had already left a permanent mark on music history. His guitar riff on Susie Q became one of the most recognizable sounds in early rock. Though he didn't receive the recognition he deserved at the time, the influence of that moment never faded. As the 1960s moved on, James became one of the most in-demand session musicians in the industry, quietly playing on records for legendary artists across country, rock, folk, and pop. His guitar appeared everywhere, even when his name didn't. By the late 1960s, James Burton was respected by everyone who mattered in music. When Elvis Presley asked him to join a new Las Vegas show in 1969, it wasn't just an invitation. It was a statement of trust. James didn't just join the band, he helped build it, assembling what would become the TCB Band. Elvis believed in James completely, trusting his leadership, his musical instincts, and his loyalty. Night after night, as Elvis performed for packed audiences, there was a moment fans came to wait for. Elvis would turn, smile, and call out for James to take the spotlight. And every time, James delivered. His pink paisley guitar became iconic, just like the bond between the two men on stage. From Las Vegas to sold-out arenas across the country, James stood beside Elvis through hundreds of performances, shaping the sound of those final years. Their relationship wasn't just professional. It was personal. James saw Elvis up close, not just as a star, but as a human being. Elvis cared deeply about his band. He checked on their families, helped when someone struggled, and made sure everyone felt valued. He loved his fans just as much, giving everything he had each time he stepped on stage, no matter how tired he was. As the years passed, the touring schedule became demanding, and Elvis pushed himself hard. James stayed loyal, even when balancing work with other respected artists. The last time James and Elvis shared a stage was in June of 1977. No one knew it would be the final performance. To James, it felt like any other show. Elvis sang with heart, the band played their best, and when the moment came, Elvis turned once more and called for James to play. Afterward, they said their usual goodbyes, expecting to see each other again soon. That moment never came. When the news reached James weeks later, it felt unreal. The loss was personal, not just historical. What stayed with him most wasn't the sadness, but the gratitude. The last memory he held was of them doing what they loved together, side by side on stage. After that chapter closed, James Burton didn't stop. He continued to play, to tour, and to inspire. He became a key part of John Denver's band for many years, recorded with countless legends, and returned home to Louisiana while still influencing music worldwide. He also focused on giving back, creating a guitar festival that supports music education for young people, helping the next generation find the same joy he once discovered. Despite health challenges later in life, James never lost his spirit. Even in his 80s, he returned to the stage with some of the greatest musicians in the world, proving that passion doesn't fade with time. Honors continued to follow, including induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame, a recognition of a lifetime spent shaping sound rather than chasing attention. When James speaks about Elvis today, his words are filled with warmth. He doesn't talk about fame. He talks about kindness. About respect. About a man who loved gospel music, who wanted people to leave concerts smiling, and who believed deeply in using success to help others. Elvis gave quietly, generously, and without expectation, and that spirit continues through the foundation that carries his name. For James Burton, Elvis Presley wasn't just the biggest name he ever worked with. He was a friend who trusted him, believed in him, and shared the stage with him during moments that became history. And every time James picks up a guitar, a piece of that connection still lives on, carried in every note, every string, and every memory that never fades. As James Burton looks back on his life today, what stands out most isn't the fame, the awards, or even the legendary stages he stood on. It's the moments between the music. The quiet conversations backstage, the long bus rides through the night, the laughter after shows, and the unspoken understanding shared between musicians who trusted each other completely. For James, those moments mattered just as much as any performance, and nowhere were they more meaningful than during his years beside Elvis Presley. James often said that Elvis had a way of making people feel seen. No matter how crowded the room was, when Elvis spoke to you, it felt like you were the only person there. He listened carefully, remembered small details, and followed up later. If you mentioned a family member who wasn't feeling well, Elvis would ask about them weeks later. That kind of attention wasn't common for someone living under constant pressure, but Elvis made it a priority. James noticed this early on and never forgot it. Behind the scenes, Elvis wasn't the larger-than-life figure the public imagined. He enjoyed simple things. He loved talking about music history, old gospel songs, and artists who inspired him as a kid. James remembered late nights when Elvis would sit quietly, humming melodies, tapping rhythms on the table, or asking questions about guitar tones and arrangements. Elvis respected musicians deeply, especially those who truly understood their craft. That respect is why James held such an important place in his world. Elvis trusted James in ways he didn't trust many others. He relied on him not just musically, but emotionally. On stage, Elvis felt safe knowing James was there, steady and reliable, ready to carry the music wherever it needed to go. Off stage, James was someone Elvis could talk to without fear of judgment. They didn't always talk about deep subjects, but when they did, the conversations stayed private. James never shared those moments publicly, even decades later, because loyalty mattered more than attention. As time went on, the pace of life took its toll. Touring was exhausting. The expectations never slowed. Elvis wanted to keep going, to keep giving audiences the best version of himself, even when it wasn't easy. James could see how much effort it took, but he also saw how deeply Elvis cared. Every show mattered to him. He didn't see performances as obligations. He saw them as connections. That's why, even on tough days, Elvis still found the strength to step into the spotlight. After Elvis was gone, the silence was heavy. For James, the world didn't stop, but it felt different. The familiar rhythm of rehearsals, sound checks, and shared routines was suddenly missing. Music was still there, but the voice that once called out to him on stage was gone. For a long time, James carried that absence quietly, choosing to honor Elvis not with words, but with music. As the years passed, fans often asked James what Elvis was really like. At first, James kept his answers short. He didn't want to reduce a complex human being into sound bites. But as time softened the weight of loss, James began to share more. Not dramatic stories, but honest ones. Stories about kindness. About generosity. About humor. About a man who laughed easily, worried deeply, and felt things intensely. James made it clear that Elvis wasn't perfect. He was human. He felt pressure. He carried expectations few people could understand. But what mattered to James was Elvis's heart. The way he treated people when no cameras were around. The way he used his success to lift others. The way he stayed connected to the music that first inspired him. James also spoke about Elvis's deep connection to spiritual music. Long after the crowds were gone and the lights were off, Elvis would return to those songs. Gospel music grounded him. It reminded him of home, of family, and of purpose beyond fame. James believed that if Elvis had lived longer, he would have explored that side of music even more deeply. It was where Elvis felt most at peace. Through all the years that followed, James Burton remained active, creative, and generous. He understood how powerful music could be, especially for young people searching for direction. That's why he invested so much time and energy into music education. Giving a guitar to a child wasn't just about an instrument. It was about offering a path, a voice, and a sense of possibility. Even after facing serious health challenges later in life, James never lost his determination. Recovery wasn't easy, but neither was the journey that brought him there. Music gave him strength, just as it always had. When he returned to the stage, audiences didn't just see a guitarist. They saw resilience. They saw history still breathing through every note. What makes James Burton's story so powerful isn't just who he played with, but how he lived. He never chased the spotlight. He let his work speak for itself. He showed up, stayed loyal, and gave his best, whether he was standing beside the biggest names in music or helping young musicians find their footing. Today, when James reflects on Elvis, there's no bitterness, no regret, only gratitude. Gratitude for the trust they shared. Gratitude for the music they created together. Gratitude for the moments that can never be recreated but will never be lost either. James believes that music holds memory, and every time those songs are played, a piece of that time returns. Fans still talk about the magic of those performances. About the energy. About the connection. About the way Elvis and James communicated without words. That bond wasn't rehearsed. It was earned. It was built on respect, trust, and a shared love for music that came from the soul. As the years continue to pass, James Burton's legacy grows stronger. Not because he demands attention, but because his influence is everywhere. In the sound of a guitar ringing out clearly and honestly. In musicians who value feeling over flash. In artists who understand that greatness isn't just about talent, but about character. James once said that when Elvis looked over and smiled during a performance, it told him everything he needed to know. It meant the music was right. It meant the moment mattered. It meant they were exactly where they were supposed to be. That connection never faded. It lives on in recordings, in memories, and in the quiet spaces where music still speaks louder than words. James Burton carries that legacy forward every time he plays, teaches, or simply remembers. And for those who listen closely, that spirit is still there. In every chord. In every story. In every moment when music reminds us that behind every legend is a human being, and behind every great artist is someone who believed in them when it mattered most. This is not just the story of a guitarist and a singer. It's the story of trust, loyalty, and the kind of friendship that doesn't need to be explained to be understood. And as long as the music continues, so does that story.